The NHS is in the worst state it's ever been. We can't carry on like this. We need decent funding and we need help.
The NHS is a very vital organ in our life. All of us rely on the NHS.
We don't want to be striking. We would much rather that the government had come to us and talked to us about what we needed.
If you don't come into nursing being like, oh, I'm going to get so much money, you come into it because you want to make a difference.
Staff are leaving the NHS. Morale is very low.
The NHS workforce have had enough. Nurses, for the first time ever, along with paramedics and other medical workers, are taking strike action after the government refused to up its offer of a 4% pay rise, whilst inflation is currently more than double that. We spoke to some of them on the picket line to get their views.
I'm out striking today because I don't know what else to do. There aren't enough people at work doing the job that we're supposed to be doing, and we've told people internally that that's the case, and they know that very well. It's not the whole reason, but part of the reason is people aren't getting paid enough for the level of skill that they do, for the level of emotional anxiety that comes with it, for the level of physical effort that is required to do nursing work. I get paid reasonably well. In normal circumstances I wouldn't complain, but I'm going home and turning one light on. I'm going home and not putting the heating on when I'm cold. I'm not eating as many hot meals as I used to. I haven't been on holiday for about 10 years, I don't think. And that's ridiculous when you think that I've been a nurse for as long as I have been, and I have the level of experience and skill that I do have, and I still can't make ends meet.
1% won't pay the rent! 1% won't pay the rent!
These nursing staff have been broken. We haven't done this lightly. This is the first time the RCN has ever been on strike in the 106-year history of the college. We aren't doing this by choice. We are doing this because we feel we have to protect our profession, protect our patients, and to improve our pay and working conditions.
Nurses are overstretched, patient safety is always compromised, things are being missed and patients are dying as a result. And it's not our fault, this is the fault of the government because they don't look after the NHS.
We're taking this action because as an NHS we are struggling. We can't retain our staff because the pay is so poor, the conditions are awful now, and our patients are suffering because nobody is listening to what we're asking for, which is to keep our patients safe and to give them the service that they deserve.
The NHS has been able to cope with fewer staff than it needed, in part because of what's called discretionary effort. People working hours that they weren't paid for. I don't think it's sustainable to say that for the future of the NHS that we should continue in perpetuity to expect that if we're not going to invest actually in the training, in the recruitment, in the pay policy, in the terms and conditions that enable people to feel valued professionals.
3 years in, I feel like I've gone through too many things, but yet I still go into work and I like what I do.
If anyone is responsible for things that happen today, it's that government in Westminster who steadfastly refused to talk to us about anything related to pay.
The unprecedented industrial action that the NHS is experiencing at the moment is triggered by some of the immediate challenges facing the service. But the seeds of this were sown a long time ago. The problems in the health service today are the result of cumulative failures of policy making over at least a decade. One of the most important issues for recruitment and retention for health service staff is feeling that you can do a good job. This crisis in COVID and cost of living, and then a pay award below inflation that just made people feel, I think, undervalued, and like there was no end in sight to this way of working, and people have had enough.
The RCN, the union behind the nurses' strikes, say that the dispute isn't just about pay, but patient safety. Record backlogs, cancelled operations and a chronic shortage of beds leave many within the NHS questioning if it's near breaking point. So what needs to be done to fix it?
The government need to listen to nurses, right? They need to listen to people on the floor and not yes, listen to, directors of nursing, listen to the high up people, but also listen to the people who go into work every single day and are there when a buzzer rings and a patient needs a change or a patient needs something, and experienced what it's like to not have that ability to be like, oh, I have time to do this, I have time to do this well. A lot of the time we're doing things to the best of our ability, but we all know it could be better. So they need to sit down and talk to us, and they need to recognise how social care and emergency care and all these other sectors have impacted on the hospitals.
The current state of the NHS is a political choice. They talk about nursing and the NHS workforce in general being a cost to the NHS, but without the workforce, the NHS doesn't exist. So if you value the NHS, then you have to value the workforce. People still need the NHS. People go bankrupt in the US all the time for medical bills. That's not necessary, and yet that's kind of what they're leading us into.
Well, you see around the country, they're queuing in the back of ambulances, and some people are doing a whole shift with the same patient before they can unload, which ain't fair for the staff themselves, and it definitely ain't fair for the patient sitting in the back of a vehicle.
All the policy rhetoric, actually for decades, has been that the NHS needs to shift from being a sickness service to being a health service, picking up disease earlier, managing it more proactively. With a system that for a decade was under such pressure, we did the reverse of that, pushing more of our resources, more of our service into the rescue end, into the more intensive hospital end, and locked in a vicious cycle where there isn't service in the community, so people deteriorate, so they have to come into hospital. You need to meet the demand in the hospital, you haven't got enough capacity, so you suck more resource into the community, and the spiral goes on and on.
The Department of Health and Social Care and the NHS will publish an independently verified plan for the number of doctors, nurses and other professionals we'll need in 5, 10 and 15 years' time, taking full account of the need for better retention and productivity improvements.
We need what Jeremy Hunt committed to in the autumn statement, which is a proper workforce plan for their health service, so people can see how the health service will be put back on a sustainable footing, and staff will see how they can have a career in the NHS where they can do a good job, deliver a high standard of care and be treated fairly. That workforce strategy needs to be developed, published, and then it needs to be funded.
When we approached the Department of Health and Social Care for comment, they pointed us towards a fact sheet that they produced, which sets out their position on the strikes. It notes that all unions are asking for an above-inflation pay rise for workers, with the RCN calling for a rise that matches inflation, plus an additional 5%. That would equate to a 19% rise, which would cost around £9.8 billion, which is around 6.5% of the total NHS budget. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, has described the strikes as deeply regrettable and added that further pay increases would mean taking money away from frontline services at a time when we are tackling record waiting lists as a result of the pandemic. Morale is at an all-time low, and a record amount of nurses, as well as a horde of paramedics, are leaving the profession. Current vacancies within the NHS stand at over 130,000. So with the public backing a lot of the strikes, will the government finally listen and negotiate with unions?
We are so willing to stop all of this and meet with our Health Secretary and work out a pay deal, but he has point blank refused it, and he is not listening to his staff. These are all NHS staff, these are his staff, and he's not listening to them.
They're just words, that's all they keep saying is, this is going to happen, but we don't see any changes.
The support is there from the majority of the public. I think politicians often will give out what they want the public to think they think. So they will clap for us on their doorsteps. I think they have the power in their hands. I think they're just choosing to either elongate the time that they're going to make us feel like this, or just not at all.
They're burying their heads in the sand to actually what is happening out in the world. You know, if they were to come and see some of the calls that we go to where they've been waiting for hours, maybe they might change their minds a bit.
The NHS workers that I talk to don't trust them at all, and that's included not just in our service, but the people you speak to in the hospitals don't trust any of this government.
If we don't feel like we're being listened to or heard, look at the people around me. These are all giving up their time and striking on their working day. We will do this again, and we will continue to do this legally until we are heard and listened by our Health Secretary and our government.